In this video, I'm going to show you the right way to make a footprint for your tent. Let's go. If you do any amount of tent camping, a footprint is an absolutely essential piece of gear. It acts as a moisture barrier and then protects your tent floor from rough surfaces, rock, sticks. However, if you plan on purchasing a footprint, they can be a little bit pricey and you can have a hard time finding one that's the exact fit for your tent. Today, I'm going to walk you through step by step what you need to do to make a custom footprint designed specifically for your tent. Before we get started on the construction part, I want to take a couple minutes and just describe what we're going to do and why. First off, we're going to be using a material called Tyvek. Tyvek here is super strong. It's used to wrap houses. It's a moisture barrier. Tyvek as a material is ideally suited for a tent footprint for a couple reasons. One, it does not absorb water. Two, it's pretty much lightweight. And three, it's tougher than a $3 steak. All right, I just set my tent up, and there's a couple things I want to show you specifically around how you're supposed to set your tent up properly with the footprint. And this is going to go into the design and how we put it together. So this is important. This is a top-down view of the tent with the footprint underneath it. So what's something that you can tell right away? You can't see the footprint at all outside of the rain fly, and that is critically important. Now if we go down here and look, it does extend maybe an inch or two outside of the bottom of the tent, so I have full coverage. But let's do a little experiment here. We're gonna pretend it's raining here. It's not actually raining, so I have to do a reenactment. And one of my faithful followers, Patrick, said he likes reenactments, so this one's for you. Now, here's my simulated rain, and what's it doing? It's running all down and outside of the area that the footprint is covering. The reason this is important is because when it's pouring rain and all that water's coming down there, that water will possibly go underneath the footprint, but you don't want it over the top. Now let's take a look at what might happen if I was doing this wrong. I'm going to go ahead and do this rain reenactment again, but this time with the footprint in a spot it's not supposed to be, which is outside the boundary of my rain fly. You can clearly see what's going on here. Look at all this water that we have that's sitting on top of the footprint. Not good. Any amount of slope or slant at all in the ground, and that is going to run completely underneath the floor of my tent and soak into everything I have, and not a good situation. The reason I wanted to go over this with you with the whole rain thing is just to show why we are going to be building our footprint slightly smaller than the outside dimensions of this area covered by our rain fly. We are ready to get to work. Step one is to figure out how much Tyvek you'll need. So for this first step, you're going to need a tape measure, your tent, and pen and paper, something to write on. You're going to take some notes here. We're going to start out with just a simple length and width measurement. We're going to get a little bit more fine-tuned a little bit later on, but the reason we're doing this step first is because we want to figure out exactly how much Tyvek we need to order. And we can get it ordered, and then we've got plenty of time later to do all the fine-tune measuring. Oh, thanks Maverick for walking through the scene. Maverick heard me sliding the tape measure underneath the tent. Now he thinks there's a squirrel under there. Look at him. Yeah, it's just a tape measure, buddy. So you slide the tape measure all the way under your tent, then you walk around to the back side of it and you make sure that it is even with the back of it. And then you go out to the very end of where your rain fly goes, and you figure out how long that is. In my case, it is just under 10 feet. So if anybody's got a Big Agnes UL2, you can cheat and not measure it yourself. You can just use my measurements. Don't paw at the tent. Next, you want to find the absolute widest spot on your tent and figure out what that measurement looks like. So in my case, it is about 5 feet. I have so much help with this video today, it's great. If you were paying attention, you noticed that I measured the long way, not just to right here, to to where the end of the tent is, but I went all the way back to the end of where the rain fly is. And the reason being is because I like to add a little bit of extra space for what I call my little porch. And you can see I've got my Z seat and my shoes that sit out here. I like this thing because it helps minimize the amount of dust and dirt that you track into your tent. And if it's just a little bit muddy out, you've got a spot where you can put your feet and not drag that last little bit into your tent. I like this a lot. I recommend that as you're coming up with your plans here, if you've got a vestibule, think about extending your footprint out a little bit so that you have a little porch like this. Step 2 is to purchase the Tyvek. This stuff you can't just go buy at Home Depot because well, you can buy it at Home Depot if you want to buy an extraordinary amount of it, but we just need a really small amount. For that purpose, there are plenty of people on eBay that sell it, and they sell it off of rolls. I recommend cheating a little bit on the larger side from what your measurements were. So mine was 10 by 5, and I know that I'm not going to extend that porch all the way out to the end of the rainfly, but I definitely don't want to cut myself short either. So I'm going to go the full 10 feet there. On the wide side, I'm going to go actually 6 feet. So I'm going to order a piece of Tyvek that is 10 by 6. The reason I'm getting it a little bit larger than what my measurements were is so that I have a little bit of wiggle room as I'm laying out my actual tent footprint dimensions and cutting around it. I don't want to have it be so tight that I don't have any room whatsoever for error, because as we all know, anytime you're doing a DIY project, sometimes things like that happen. Jump onto eBay and do a search on Tyvek tent footprint. You'll see plenty of options here, and since I'm looking at a 10 by 6 footprint, I want to purchase from a 10-foot roll, and I want 6 feet from this 10-foot roll. So I click on it, and in the quantity I pick 6, and it's $1.80 per foot. Now add to cart, and you're good to go. All right, we are back. Several days have passed after my order, and look what came in the mail, my brand new Tyvek. And we are on to step number 3, which is detailed measurements. For this step, I recommend having some graph paper like this. I didn't have any on hand, so I just Googled printable graph paper and printed off a sheet, and we're good to go. For this step, go ahead and get your tent set up, get it nice and taut so you can end up with an exact sizing for the footprint. I started mine by measuring the long way. Next, I measured the width across the front of the tent, and that gives a great baseline starting point for length and width. Then I measured across the back. And then lastly, figure out what you want for your little porch on your vestibule and do a measurement there. I want about a 15-inch porch, so I'm gonna add that in as well and add that to my graph paper. This is what my diagram looked like after transferring my measurements to the graph paper. For reference, I used a scale of 1 square on the graph paper equals 3 inches. Now is when the fun starts. Step 4, construction. You're gonna wanna find a large flat surface to work on. And I recommend grabbing some masking tape and taping your Tyvek to the floor so it stays nice and taut. That'll make working on it much, much easier. Next, transfer the tent footprint layout from the graph paper to the Tyvek. Use a straight edge, a Sharpie, and a tape measure to make sure you have everything exact. One thing you might be asking yourself is, how do I transfer this to my Tyvek? I'm going to give you some tips on how to get that done. I'm going to use a blank sheet of paper as my Tyvek here, just so it's a lot easier to show close up. The first thing you want to do using a pencil is to bisect your Tyvek right down the middle. The next thing you want to do is make a reference line for yourself about 6 inches from the bottom. So this is a nice starting point. I've got a line down the middle and then a line 6 inches from the bottom. In looking at my diagram, I can see that the distance from the back of the tent to the front of the tent is 85 inches. Remember, this is the porch area here. So I'm going to draw this line across at 85 inches. So that's another good reference line there. Now I know that it is 52 inches wide, so I'll just measure out 26 inches on either side of my center line. And what I'm going to do is draw dots for myself, one here and one here. That's where I know the outside edge at the front of the tent footprint will be. Now the bottom is 42 inches, so I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. I'm just going to measure 21 inches from either side and make a dot there. I also know that in looking at my diagram, the back is angled up slightly about 1 inch. So I'm actually going to move these dots up about 1 inch. And now I can get out the Sharpie and make the official line. The pencil is for the reference lines and the Sharpie is for the actual outline. So I would do that on my Tyvek. And I also know that this is part of the official line down here as well. It is 15 inches on the porch, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a reference line across the top at that 15-inch mark. And this is what I'm going to do in pencil again. And I know the number at the very top of the porch was 42 inches. So from this reference line, I'm going to go 21 inches to the left and 21 inches to the right and make a dot. And now I have all the reference points I need to finish this out. And there you have it. That's how you transfer your diagram from the graph paper to the Tyvek. So now I have my initial design laid out on the Tyvek. You can see my lines there. And luckily it does appear to match my diagram on the graph paper. But we are not ready to start cutting. I can't stress this enough. Do not start cutting around this line because there's more to do before we get there. What we're going to do is we're going to allow for a 1-inch flap that we're going to fold over and glue. So what I want you to do next is to make another line around the perimeter of your existing line that is exactly 1 inch, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is what it should look like after you have the 1-inch border. Now the other thing you're going to want to do here is everywhere there's a corner, you're going to make a dashed line between the two lines. And I'll explain all that when we get a little bit further in. But go ahead and do that step now. All right, this is looking fantastic. I've got all my lines drawn out and I got my dotted lines where I need them. Now we're ready to start cutting it out, and you can use scissors, which work just fine for cutting Tyvek. Or if you have anyone in the house that sews, my wife has this little doohickey here that is awesome. You just run it along the board and it cuts right through it. You just got to make sure you have something solid underneath because it'll also cut your flooring, and that will not make anybody happy in the household. So let's go, let's get this thing cut out. All right, we got there. We got it all cut out. You can see I cut around the outside line. I've got my dotted lines cut. And we're ready for the next part of the construction step, which is gluing. And what I suggest doing before you start this is pre-fold all of your lines along here. It's going to make it a lot easier when you get there. So this takes a little bit of time. Just go and pre-fold so you've got a nice bend across this inner line. For this next part, we're going to glue the tab down, and for that you'll need some contact cement. Now the contact cement, you're going to brush it on the tabs lightly, let it dry for a little bit, and like maybe a few minutes, and then stick it together. I'd wear gloves for this because this stuff is a little bit messy. The reason we're going to use contact cement is because it's waterproof and it lasts a really long time. I've been using the same tent pad for a long time, years, and the glue has held up great. It hasn't come loose at all. So this stuff is awesome, and this is the kind of glue I would recommend for this job. Also, contact cement has some crazy fumes, so for this job, we're going to head out to the garage. So we're going to start applying the contact cement here, and This stuff is quite messy. I like to do a nice thin layer, get complete coverage over the whole flap from the very edge all the way around. And get it on these little corner pieces here. And then do just a little bit also on this other part. So I just got done gluing it, and you can see I've got a really nice reinforced border here. This is great, gives it a nice clean look and will help extend the life of the tent pad. This does need to dry overnight. I would read the instructions on whatever adhesive that you used for yours, but mine says to let it dry overnight. One thing you might notice is this is very loud and obnoxious when you move it around, but there is a hack for that. And after this is done drying overnight, tomorrow I will show you how to fix that noise. So let's take a look and see how we did. I've installed the new tent footprint under my tent, and this is absolutely perfect. I've got full coverage, so it extends just barely outside the tent itself. But then when I have my rain fly on, it will be underneath the rain fly, so no water will get on my tent footprint. And there's my little porch. Be a little welcome mat every time I climb in my tent at night. And now the trick for making it quieter, you run it through the washing machine. So this is all done and out of the washing machine now, and listen to how much quieter it is. Let's do a little before and after. One optional thing that you can do after you're all done is to install grommets on the corners. And the reason you might want to do this is because when you're trying to put this thing up and it's super windy, if you have these grommets in here, you can put a tent stake through each one at the corners and hold it in place while you're getting your tent out and getting it ready to set up. Just an optional thing if you want to do a little bit extra. Since I already have my own tent footprint, this one I need to give away. And if you've seen any of my videos, you've seen a guy named Theron in a lot of them. He hikes with me a lot. He's helped me out tremendously by sharing footage on areas where I messed up with my camera. And thanks for all the help I've had from Theron. This one's for you. Next time I run into you, you can have this. Theron and I happen to have the exact same tent, and I'm happy to give this to you. In case you're wondering, here are the total costs. $20 for the Tyvek, $5 for the contact cement, for a grand total of $25 for this project. That should be everything you need to know to build your own tent footprint, custom built specifically for your tent. If anything wasn't clear or you have any questions, please leave a comment and I will respond as quick as I can. As always, if you found any value in this video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks, and enjoy your new tent footprint.